Yeah, so I travel about 6 months out of the year, and then I spend the other 6 months in a house that my wife and I share in the United States.
So you just met Dale, and this is a different interview than you would typically find on my channel because Dale does not live in Mexico, but I met him in Mexico. I met him in Oaxaca. We are here at a language school. We are both learning some Spanish, me accidentally learning some Spanish, and this is something that he does on a regular basis. So we're gonna talk about Dale's kind of lifestyle because I think you heard it there in his introduction that he shares a house with his wife, which is not how I would put it necessarily with the way that I live with my wife. I wanted to break in really quickly from the editing suite because this video is sponsored by Lingoda, which is a language learning tool that I use online. I mentioned that I was taking a class in Oaxaca when I met Dale, and I really enjoy that face-to-face learning, but it's not always possible to make that happen. And I've personally found that mixing lots of styles of learning is best for me, and part of my mix is using Lingoda. I want to talk about Lingoda because they're having a sale right now on their Flex product. That's the one I use. You start out by taking a quick test to figure out what level you're at. And then what's great about Flex is that you can choose the topic and the time that you want to take a class. And then you get grouped with up to 5 other students. And each class is led by a human being, a native level speaker. Now, every time I go into these classes, I admit that I start out with this kind of feeling in my stomach of like, oh, am I going to be the dumbest one in the class? And I look and I see the other students and I'm like, oh my God, that guy looks smart. That woman looks like she's going to be more fluent than me. But it always ends up being a class with other people who are making some of the same mistakes that I make and who are stumbling and struggling the same way that I do, which is really reassuring. Anche ahora vive en Buenos Aires. El próximo año Now, I do have a discount code for you, so if you use the link down below, you're going to get 10% discount and up to 45 free private classes when you sign up today with my code Brighton New Year. They have a free 7-day trial, so you can try up to 3 classes before you start paying. So if you're planning to settle in Mexico, you really should learn at least some of the language. I found my experiences in Mexico become more rich as I've learned more of the language. And Lingoda, I think, is a really great tool that you can use before you move to Mexico and while you're living in Mexico. But now let's return to Dale's story about his unconventional marriage and his exciting travels. The reason I wanted to do this video is when I heard his story, I was like, you know what, it's a different way of doing things. And that's really what I want to show folks on my channel is that whatever is the traditional way of doing things, you can totally do that and be happy. You could totally live in the United States and sit on your couch and watch TV and in retirement, just kind of hang out. If that works for you, that works for you. But there are many, many other ways to do things. So let's hear more about kind of where or how Dale got to this point in his life.
I was in the power plant business, and my poor wife, I think she counted up, we moved 14 times. And the last 10 years or so of our marriage, she got kind of tired of all that moving and said, I'm not moving anymore. So those last 10 years, we were separated. And I went off and did my job. And then I was downsized, made redundant, as you will. So I didn't know what to do. I called my daughter in California, who was working out there, and she had been hanging out at the yoga ashram. And she said, Dad, you can go there and volunteer. And so I did that. I found out, hey, you can get like free rent and food and just work for these places. So that started me on my whole thing. So I never looked back at my career. So I worked I lived for a couple of years out of a suitcase. I did travel all over out west, came back east, and I got a volunteering gig in Scotland at Holy Owl over there, and I hang out in monasteries, stuff like that. But then my wife, after about 2, 3 years into this traveling, living in a suitcase, she had moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and she got sick, and so I went there to help her out, and she was recuperating. And then COVID came. And, we're living in this 2-bedroom apartment and get along pretty good. And I said, well, and the interest rates were low. So I said, why don't we just build a house? I'll have a bedroom, place to keep my stuff, and, I can go as I will. So that's kind of what we got going on now. I like I said, it averages about 6 months travel. I just got my residency card in Mexico just to have the option to stay here longer if I want. So I'm still feeling in and out, but I still got friends in Europe. I got things to do over there. So I kind of want to split my time between Asheville, Europe, and Oaxaca, Mexico.
So COVID was an interesting time for all of us, and for Dale, it put him back in touch with his wife in a more long-term situation and building a house together. But I think I'm more interested in the time that he spends away from that house, maybe because that's the adventurous side of life. So let's hear more about what he's doing when he's not in, was it Asheville, North Carolina?
Yes. Yeah.
When he's not in Asheville, North Carolina, what those other places are for him.
Well, one of the biggest attractions to things like monastery and volunteering is kind of on a limited budget. So when I can get like this place I go in Scotland called Holy Isle. It's a Buddhist monk owns the property, and he opened it up to any kind of spiritual retreat that anybody wanted to have. So they do. There's like 15 people on staff, maybe like 5 volunteers, and then every week there's a different thing: a yoga retreat or silent retreat, or things spiritual but not necessarily Buddhist. So I get to eat the food made by culinary chefs and get my own room. And I work in this wonderful garden and just meet these amazing people, like the staff that's there, that they're like usually in their 40s or so, and they've been there for a bunch of years. And yeah, so I like Holy Owl. I do that regular. And before I go on Holy Owl, because it's like a ferry ride out to Arn, and then it's like a little boat that you take out onto the island. It's 2 miles long and a half a mile wide. I stop in the village there across the bay and have some single malt scotch and some cask ales that they have there that are just amazing. And the scones are incredible in Scotland. And I always drink tea there because, coffee is more like an Italian thing. So, and then, so the monasteries that I go to, they're usually the more stricter orders, like Benedictine, and I like to just get in the rhythm with the monks. Get up at 4:30 for the first thing that they do, and yeah. And I mentioned in the other little sequence that I was doing that I was at that yoga ashram for those 6 months, and it was a Shivananda ashram, and they do the same routine every time. So I memorize it. So I take that with me. It's a gift from my daughter that told me I could go there. And I have a daughter that lives in Sweden, and she set me up with this. They go there in the winter because the rates are cheaper. And there's this little island that I go to there. You take a half-hour ferry ride, and they have summer homes out there. But in the winter, you can get them really cheap. So I do that in the winter, and then I can go and see her after she gets done with her job, and she has a husband there. And like this next year, I have a friend and lives her whole life in Vienna. We went to high school together. I'm going to go visit her. And now that I've got my permanent residency card in Mexico, I plan to come here more too. And I just go to the same place. I'm kind of a creature of habit, and I just, once I find something I like, I don't venture a whole lot from it. So I've been coming back to this language school, which is run by Magdalena and Alberto, who have become amazing friends over the years. And they just, it's so weird because I really kind of failed at learning to speak Spanish. I just can't seem to get it, but I keep working at it. So I come here and really can communicate like I'm communicating now with Magdalena and Alberto, but I just feel so loved by them. And I think they're like what the world needs more of. I keep always tell them when I write them notes and stuff that they're creating world peace because they're creating the space that people can learn to communicate with each other with.
Mm.
So yeah, and I just love walking the streets here. I feel at home. The food. There's an amazing resource called the Oaxaca Lending Library. A lot of English speakers there, so I can get that. But I'm in a knitting group there. There's a men's group that I go to, so I get kind of my anonymous thing. So and just being by myself is just what I like. I get into routine. I still get up at 4:30 in the morning, like with the monks. I meditate. It takes me till 8 o'clock to get to my routine. I make sure I get a yoga thing in 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah, so I just fall into it's just like a sabbatical when I'm out. I actually wrote a little haiku, and it goes something like, "Past security, the weight of my pack feels good. Sublime joy bubbles."
I love it. Yeah, the pack feeling good. I think that is a wonderful just way to think about things. And I think here, this video is going to be one of my shorter ones. I wanted to just introduce you guys to Dale because this is a different way of doing things. This is much more nomadic, but spending time in each place, I guess some people would call it slow travel. So spending time in each place long enough to really enjoy it, not just kind of like being a tourist, but being more like a local in a place and also repeating it. So I've got some other videos that I think you'll be interested in here. One is Lisa, and she does this as a house sitter, but she goes from place to place going to the same houses, and she has her schedule built out. When people in those houses go on vacation, she goes in and takes care of their pets, takes care of their homes. So check out that video with Lisa here as a different way that you could make this work living outside the United States. There's some more videos down here of other folks who are doing something different too. And I'll see you in the next video. Hasta luego.